All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking an objective look at a really fascinating philosophical lecture. We are going to break down a framework that maps out a highly specific, direct connection between everyday economic success, like running a successful local business, and something as massive as the spiritual liberation of your ancestors. It's a totally unique perspective that blends practical, everyday economics with some very deep metaphysical cultural concepts. So let's map out exactly how the speaker connects these seemingly unrelated worlds step by step. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth connects the success of a local mom-and-pop restaurant to the spiritual liberation of your ancestors? I mean, at first glance, those two things seem like they are in completely different universes, right? But we're going to explore the speaker's framework that traces a very deliberate generational chain of energy. It's a chain that actually starts with a humble business owner just trying to make ends meet and ends with the ultimate unbinding of ancestral spirits in the afterlife. Let's look at how this philosophy builds that bridge. So let's start with phase one, the flow of wealth. Before we get too deep into the spiritual side of things, we really need to look at how this speaker defines everyday success. And it's pretty wild. According to this lecture, if you open a restaurant and it takes off, it's actually not just because you're a fantastic cook, or even because you're working crazy hours. The speaker argues you could have all the skill in the world, but if the universe, what they call great nature, doesn't actively push people and economic energy your way, you're simply not going to make it. Success happens because of a deliberate concentration of resources orchestrated by a higher natural order. So how does this actually play out over time? Well, the speaker lays out a very clear progression. First, great nature sends everyday folks to your business. They bring in small amounts of cash, sure, but more importantly, they bring information. Maybe it's a casual tip about a cheap plot of land or a hot new investment. Fast forward a decade or so, and you've been casually putting that gathered capital to work based on those tips. Suddenly you look up, and while your actual restaurant might only be worth a little bit, those side investments, they've unexpectedly ballooned into massive wealth, like 3 billion won massive. The universe basically centralized that economic energy right in your lap. Which brings us to phase two, rise of the intellectual. Now, we all know parents want the best for their kids, right? But this philosophy takes that idea and cranks it way up. It insists that hoarding all this massive wealth is absolutely not the end game. It's just a stepping stone. All those decades of hard work, that universal alignment we just talked about, it actually has one primary purpose: getting the next generation a higher education. That money is literally just a tool to send the descendant off to study abroad or reach the highest levels of academia. The parents do the heavy lifting of gathering resources so the kids can step into a world of advanced knowledge that the parents never had access to. And because of that financial backing, the child transforms into what the speaker calls an intellectual, or jisijin in Korean. Now, we're not just talking about someone with a fancy diploma. This is a person armed with profound knowledge and the massive financial power their family built up, and they are fully prepared to take on some seriously influential societal roles. The intellectual represents the family making this huge leap forward, moving from basic economic survival to actually shaping society. And that leads right into phase three, designing a better society. All right, so armed with all these resources and this top-tier education, the intellectual steps out into the real world. The speaker draws a really sharp line in the sand here. They argue that ignorant folks tend to operate recklessly. They make plans based on jumukugu, which is this Korean term for rough, rule-of-thumb guesswork that totally lacks logical foresight. It's just winging it, basically. But a true intellectual, they use their educated mind to engineer massive, logical projects that genuinely benefit humanity as a whole. They're taking that concentrated family wealth and actually putting it to work to help people. And the emotional payoff for this is absolutely huge. The speaker notes, when the intellectual designs for society, the family shines and the descendants become joyful. It's a total win-win. By successfully pulling off these grand, helpful projects, you're not just elevating your family's standing to a place of honor. More importantly, doing this highly impactful work brings you, the descendant, to a state of profound, genuine joy and fulfillment. You're literally living out your highest purpose. And this is where things take a major turn in phase four, liberating the ancestors. So that profound joy we just talked about, it actually triggers the final, most metaphysical part of this whole framework. This is where practical societal design crosses straight over into the spiritual realm. To get this, we need to talk about two really heavy cultural concepts, Han and Go. Han represents a deep, lingering sorrow or resentment, while Go refers to karmic knots.
According to this philosophy, these are the heavy emotional and spiritual weights, keeping ancestral spirits tied down to the physical world, stopping them from finding peace in the afterlife.
It works like this. If you, the living descendant, are struggling, constantly stressed out, and just having a hard time, your ancestors are literally frozen in their sorrow. They can't move on. The lecture describes these spirits as basically stuck wandering the 9 heavens in a deeply pained state, constantly checking in on their struggling kids. It means the ancestors are totally dependent. The living descendants literally hold the key to their ancestors' spiritual freedom.
Which brings us to the core thesis of this entire explainer. If my descendants are joyful, my ancestors become joyful, and their knots are untied. Let that sink in. The absolute only way to untie the karmic knot of your ancestors is for you to be genuinely happy. The emotional state of the living is basically a mirror for the dead. So when that educated descendant finds joy by giving back to society, that exact feeling of joy radiates backward through the lineage, instantly dissolving the ancestor's sorrow. Isn't that wild?
And man, this completely flips traditional beliefs on their head. The speaker is super clear about this. You are never going to achieve spiritual liberation by doing traditional religious rites. Hitting a wooden fish in a temple, doing the standard ancestral ceremonies, begging to heavens for salvation, the speaker claims those old methods just plain don't work. Modern spiritual liberation is purely a byproduct of you living a joyful life by contributing logical, helpful designs to society. So that brings us to our final point, a new paradigm of duty. How does all of this reshape what we think of as our duty to our family? Well, it pushes us completely away from superstition and straight toward real, actionable engagement with the world. It's a massive call to action to drop the ignorant rituals of the past. Instead, you need to put 100% of your focus into logical, societal contribution. Why? Because when you use your education and your resources to genuinely help the world, you become truly happy. And living that joyful, impactful life automatically frees your ancestors without you ever having to say a single traditional prayer. The ultimate act of ancestral worship, in this view, is simply living a great, impactful life yourself.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty big question. How does your daily grind today connect to the broader lineage of your past and your future? Just think about your own day-to-day routine. Whether you buy into the speaker's spiritual mechanics here or not, it's an incredibly fascinating lens to look through. It suggests that the everyday hustle, saving money, learning new things, might carry a metaphysical weight way beyond our own lifetimes. It echoes backward to heal our ancestors and forward to elevate humanity. Thanks for hanging out with me for this deep dive, and as always, keep asking those big questions.